Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Sasha Chilkova. I'm a marketing manager here at Witham. Today we'll be talking about securing your remote workforce from the Microsoft Cloud. We have some best practices and tips and a demo even today. Just a few housekeeping items before we dive in. We are recording the webinar. We have a lot to cover today. We'll try to keep it to about 50 minutes and make sure to leave some room for questions. Feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar. You can use the questions panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. Don't hold back. If we don't get to questions and run out of time, we'll be sure to address them individually. We can reach out to you by email. And as I mentioned, we will share the recording and the slide deck later this afternoon. And with that, today I have Chris, who you see here joining us, Christian, and Daniel. And I think we're ready to get started.
Fantastic. Let me go to the next slide. Good afternoon, Daniel.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daniel Cohen-Numani. I'm a partner here at Witham Digital. We're excited to have you join us this afternoon, or this morning if you're on the West Coast, to speak about remote work and security. We've aligned a group of experts, Chris and Christian. They will introduce themselves in a moment. A little bit of background about myself. I've been working in digital transformation initiative for almost 25 years now, specifically with Office 365, SharePoint, and Dynamics. And I have tremendous amount of interest in productivity in the modern workplace, or Work 2.0. So thanks for joining again.
Thank you as well. So my name is Chris Ertz. I lead our cloud practice here. Our team is in charge of helping our customers get the most value out of their Microsoft 365 investments. It's been about a year since we've been in our current pandemic situation. Today I'm back at the office. I occasionally come into the office. But in the last year, we've been super busy helping clients move to the cloud and then secure that remote work. And so today is going to be based on a lot of those best practices. And we're sharing with feedback from clients and the experience that we are all going through right now. My fun fact is been spending a lot of time in the Microsoft Cloud. I actually started my career at Microsoft for the Windows 95 launch, and I was on stage for that and have been on stage for many, many Microsoft presentations since. Happy to be here again today to talk about securing remote work. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Christian.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, guys. My name is Christian Covella, and I work as a security architect for the Azure product, or the cloud services in Microsoft Cloud. I'm a certified Microsoft cloud security. I have a strong background in delivering complex cloud solutions. Some of my interests, some of my technical interests are cloud computing, IoT, big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence. A really fun fact about myself, I helped the Microsoft Intune product team discover and fix one of their SCEP profile or SCEP bug that we're rolling out with one of their with the Intune service, and they actually deployed. They made a patch, and we deployed that service across the globe. So.
Thank you, Christian. Very, very good. So again, what to expect from today's webinar? We are focusing around securing remote workforce, and we're going to break it into 4 different pillars around identity. We'll talk about device management. We'll give you insights to how we can access resources using Windows Virtual Desktop, but primarily focusing on the applications that your users need to get access to while working remotely. Sound good? Here we go. So what's top of mind for Witham clients in the past year or so? How can we work remote more efficiently? We know that our employees are working from multiple locations, and they need to do their work more efficiently with the best tools that are in the market. And as you're enabling those capabilities, security is always top of mind. So we know that they're accessing sensitive data on a variety of different endpoints, and they might be personally owned, they may be corporate driven. So how do we establish policies across those different modalities to secure the information that is in our cloud or in our network? that intellectual property that's important for us to maintain control. We're also looking at ways to reduce costs, not just through office space, but enabling people to be productive no matter where they are, and new ways to work. We've also seen an increase from the industry of exploits related to cyber attacks. So here's some statistics. The Department of Homeland Security says that these cyber criminals are getting more sophisticated with COVID-related scams and phishing emails. I'm sure there are plenty out there of getting people to sign up for the vaccine at this point. So you can imagine everyone is evaluating this, and potentially there are some poor players in the market that are taking advantages through scams. So be very careful. We've also seen from the World Health Organization a huge amount of cyber attacks, and they encourage vigilance training. There's many different ways that we can make sure our users are protected. We'll talk about some of those best practices here in our webcast. Let's start with our first poll, though. Sasha?
All right. So we'll appreciate everyone's participation here. Just want to learn a little bit more about how you're dealing with your remote workforce today. So we'd like to know what percentage of your workforce is remote, less than 50, 100%, or not sure. Let's give just maybe 10 more seconds for everyone to vote. All right, it looks like the majority is 67% of the audience is 100% remote. So looks like everybody voted. So right up the alley for this webinar.
Perfect. So what can we do to make sure that those remote workers are securely working from home while protecting your corporate resources? And this is another framing slide for our conversations this afternoon. We also see that over on the left-hand side that workers are both in the office and at home, and we're starting to see video collaboration important for the corporate office because executives and certain people are returning to the office, but they still need to collaborate with people working from home, and video is really picking off. So Teams and Teams meetings, Teams meeting rooms, and video collaboration is a popular practice of ours. We've seen that clients have a difficulty rolling out new security controls. There's so many different options, and you can get quite granular with the level of access and the role-based access and the resources. And so we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about the need for remote access to those applications. We've seen some challenges top right on VPN scalability constraints. If you're still leveraging that model for users to access corporate resources, that of course puts a smaller pipe on the network and a strain on access points at our DMZ back to CorpNet. We've also seen there's been some exploits around VPN. So there's a challenge to manage all this new devices that are coming onto the network, especially if some are personal owned. It all starts with identity. And so I'm going to turn over to Christian to focus on identity security and how we can leverage the tools in the Microsoft platform to secure the identity. Over to you, Christian. Before we get started, that was me. It's actually a poll to get started. So back to that question earlier, Sasha, about VPN. Let's bring up the next poll.
Yes. So how do your users currently connect to your office network? VPN, desktop virtualization, other option, or maybe you're not sure. And if you guys are selecting other, feel free to chat us what that other is, just using the chat feature. It looks like it's split halfway between actually all three, VPN, desktop, or other, literally split 3 ways.
Okay. So
evenly.
desktop virtualization.
Yeah, let us know what the other is. Go ahead.
Great. Now I'll turn it over to Christian.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm just trying to get my Mac switched over. All right. Thanks, Chris. So let's go back quick. Okay. So when we talk about the current scale and remote working at the moment, right now we're seeing a vast majority of users that are accessing their devices, that are connecting from their laptops to access the corporate data, accessing emails, right? Some organizations are issuing company-owned devices, like corporate iOS devices, Android devices for remote workers, right? Some of the frontline workers have managed or corporate-owned devices. And so with such a large amount of devices that are connecting to your corporate resources, there's a huge threat to your infrastructure, and there's a huge identity risk that can bring to your organization, right? So when we talk about the secure and remote workforce, we're looking at how can we protect your endpoints across everything within the organization. And so when we look at the pillars of security in the Microsoft Cloud, we first look at the identity aspect. So in order to protect identities, one of the great features that Microsoft offers, and a way that customers are able to can leverage this feature for protecting their users, is using a feature called conditional access. We see a lot of our customers when rolling out or adopting Microsoft 365 or going to the cloud. One of the first features that, from a security standpoint, that we always talk with our customers is how can they protect their identity. And when we look at the scale of the different types of devices that are accessing different cloud resources through Azure Active Directory, conditional access is a great way to be able to protect your users, because you get features. You'll be able to do signals. Let's say, for example, users are accessing data from a restricted zone or restricted location. So with conditional access policies, we can go in and we can actually create a custom policy, or create a policy that says, hey, if this user is accessing your cloud resources from X location that is not authorized, then they won't get access to them, right? And with this, you can also do a lot of great integration with different Microsoft 365 products, such as Endpoint Manager for your endpoint protection. And if you have an E5 license, you can also look at MCAS as well. Okay. So when we talk about enabling remote access to apps, right, there's a lot of capabilities with your identity scope, because you can help your users to be able to do things such as single sign-on through your Azure Active Directory. We see a lot of our customers are using Microsoft Azure AD for their IDP, or they might be using something as Okta. But when using Microsoft Azure Active Directory, you can publish your applications through My Apps, where users can go in. If you have third-party applications that you want to integrate with Azure Active Directory, you can do those integration and give your users a single sign-on process. And Chris will give us a demo of that later on. Okay. So when we look at security, as well as what is a great way to preventing some of those identity attacks. A key feature that most customers, and we're seeing a lot of our customers are now adopting, is an MFA policies. Right? And when you're using MFA, you're able to prevent attacks by almost 99.9%. Sorry, it will be able to prevent 99.9% of identity attacks by using MFA. Because when using MFA, you can put in conditions that put in place that says, hey, you can user must authenticate user maybe through a phone call. User may have to authenticate through the Microsoft Authenticator application, or they can use other different types of methods. And this just ensures that the identity that is accessing your cloud resources is secured and is the valid user who they say they are. Because a lot of threats and a lot of attacks go after the user identity. So with that said, I was just going to quickly show you guys a conditional access and what that experience looks like from the Microsoft 365 tenant. So let me go ahead and stop. 1 second.
While you're bringing it up, I'll just reinforce, yes, if your identity is compromised and you have MFA set up, watch out for your phone, right? So of course you want to go in and change your password. That's always a great thing to have IT do. But if you have MFA set up, unless they have your phone, they're not getting into that application. It does take some training to get people used to using MFA, especially if the application is, I think, the simplest. All right, I see your demo now, Christian.
Awesome. So in this demo, I'm just going to quickly show you guys how and where to be able to create some of these policies, right, in your IDP, if you're using Microsoft Azure Active Directory as your IDP. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to the portal.azure.com, to the Azure portal. And then here you can just simply search for Azure Active Directory. So when you go to the Azure Active Directory, in this scenario, I'm using the Contesto as the test environment. And here we have, if we go down to security, we can see here there's a couple of features here within your that you can create, that you can look at with your identity security, right? From conditional access, identity protection, security center, and different types of reporting, right? Such as risky users, any risky sign-in policies, right? But for here, we're going to look at the conditional access. So here, we're going to go to conditional access. In this scenario, I'm going to create a new policy. In this policy, we're just going to say, I'm going to show you guys a simple policy where users must be, we're going to block let's say we're going to just block device compliance. If a user isn't compliant, right, then they can access their Microsoft 365 account. So, so then here, you name your policy, and then here you can select your users. For here, I'm just going to select all my users. Now, something that you should be very, very careful of is whenever you're creating conditional access policies, you want to make sure you want to exclude, if you can, it's best practice to exclude your global admins or any accounts that are extremely that maybe have like directory roles that you don't want to get, that you don't want to impact this policy on. But for here, I'm just going to do a quick demo. Here, I'm just going to add it to all my users, because the scenario here is the users, any users who are accessing through Office 365 must have a compliant device. So, yeah. All right. On the cloud apps, here we can select our cloud applications or whichever applications that we want to target this policy towards. And then for here, I'm just going to go ahead and select my cloud apps. So we're going to see here whichever cloud apps that I want to target. And I'm going to select my Office 365. And here you're going to select your conditions. Now, you can select your user risk policy depending on the risk policy that you want to determine, right? Azure AD will do we'll look for things such as like if a user is doing like impossible traveling, right? It'll consider that as a risky user. Users coming in from anonymous IP, it might trigger that user as a risky user as well. So you can define here the threshold, the risk user for your policy. So for here, I'm just going to do a demo do medium, and then here you can define your device platforms. Right, this just states that where are the users, which endpoints that the user must come from when this policy is enabled. So for this policy, we're just going to go ahead and select our Windows devices and iOS and Android. Right. So this policy is going to say if users are coming in from these OSs, then they must be compliant. Right? And then here, this is the locations, right? So depending on the use cases that you may have, you can define which locations or IPs that you consider trusted. You can select those, but here I'm just going to put any location. and then client apps. Right? So this controls which applications that the users, which client apps that the user must use whenever accessing whenever accessing Office 365. So for this one specifically, we're going to target our modern authentication clients, such as our browser and mobile device and desktop clients. Best practices is to not enable legacy applications because they create a lot of risk. They pose a lot of risks. So here, select our client apps, device state. We can define our device state. The device must be Azure AD hybrid joined, or it must be Intune compliant, right? And what this will do is, if your identity is synced with back to your on-premise, then it'll go back and check for that device compliance. So here, quickly. All right. So done. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and just do a create. Oops, sorry.
Chris,
so here you must define your grant.
I noticed you left the Mac out of it. So just like you're a Mac user, you're always underneath the radar, aren't you? That might have been unintentional, but you excluded yourself.
Yeah.
All right, we should wrap this up.
So sorry.
Lines quickly.
Yep. Yeah. So quickly here. Here's where you can grant your different accesses. So for identity, as we talk about identity, MFA is a really great one. Device compliant, right? These would just make sure that these two are met before accessing those resources. And that just quickly shows you how to be able to create a conditional access policy. And then when a user signs in, then they'll be blocked from that policy. But I'll wrap up real quickly and pass it over to Chris.
Great. Thank you. Let me switch over and make sure that I'm presenting the right screen. Okay, can you see the secure Connect Any User app slide?
Yep.
Great. So thanks, Christian. It just shows the granular detail. And what we do when we have these conversations with our clients is, there's a lot of policy you have to think about when you're creating these types of controls in place. It may be a good idea to test this out for a limited set of users and then collect that feedback, add some communications to this so users are prepared for these changes. So I wanted to show you how we can provide a single access application to a portal. So once you've had this set up and you've approved all the applications, with Azure Active Directory, you have something called the My Apps portal. And this allows us to publish all the approved apps that use single sign-on. And why this is important, especially if you have new employees coming on board. IT is all constrained with the amount of resources that we can provide to the field. And the last thing you want to do is have a long checklist of applications that you needed to manage. So the nice thing about having it set up through Azure Active Directory, again, using that secure access, that one identity in Microsoft 365, is you can provide access to the other line of business applications that are important for that user. And you can think about, okay, I'm hiring someone in operations. Here's the 6 applications that operations need. And you can get quite granular again as well, allowing you to filter and add application collections. So when someone comes on board, they have a well-approved app portal with all the apps that they need. The other thing that's important is if they leave the organization, let me go ahead and share another screen. If they leave the organization, you turn off access to Office 365, and now you've blocked access to all these other applications. And so this is a quick way to, again, control the intellectual property that might be shared across these other applications. So I can get there by going to myapplications.microsoft.com. I can also get there from the Office portal. And you might have seen this from the Office Waffle, Office 365, with the all apps. So they're all listed here, but this is a nice, easy to see user interface. And I can scroll through and see all the corporate approved applications that are using Active Directory identity to access my line of business systems. And so here's our expense report as a quick example. When I click on Chrome River, it knows my credentials. Here they are. And I'm logged into my expense reporting application. So I don't need to remember a separate password for it. It's been a while since I created the expense report, but I know where I can get access to it. So that's just a quick view of all the applications and how easy it is to customize this based upon role. That's the app portal. Back over to Christian to do device management, but we have another poll coming up first.
All right. We'd like to know if you use Azure Active Directory for your IDP.
Identity provider.
Yep.
Everyone does. There's still some LDAP directories out there.
So it looks like actually no one said yes. A lot of people are unsure or no. So
okay. Well,
So,
if you have,
Chris, if I can add something, I think if
Yeah.
for everyone's knowledge, if you are using Office 365, you are using Azure AD as your identity provider.
correct. Christian, you want to go through this? Did you mute Christian? There we are.
Sorry, guys. So let me go ahead and present my screen. All right. So thanks, Chris, and thanks, Daniel, for rating that. If you are a Microsoft 365, you're at this moment, you're most likely using Azure Active Directory. Now, we know the challenges right now with managing endpoints across your organizations. Earlier in the slide, I talked about users that are using multiple devices to accessing your Office 365 environment, right? Such as, for example, I use my iPhone device. I have a Mac. I have Windows, a VM. I have multiple devices that I use to be able to access my Witham environment. So how are you able to ensure that you have a unified experience or a unified location to be able to manage that window of your devices across your organization? And Microsoft Endpoint Manager, formerly Intune, gives you that capability, right? And with Endpoint Manager this year, or last year, I believe, the product was merged together with SCCM, or Configuration Manager. So it allows you to integrate your on-premise device management or capability, SCCM, with Intune for your cloud analytics. Okay? And here it'll give you access, it will give you the capability to control your devices across the whole plane of your organization. Okay. So when we talk about Intune, as a device management, we don't just look at just the aspect of managing devices, right? We'll look at also what can it offer as far as from an operational standpoint, right? We know at the moment that COVID-19 has put a lot of pressure and a lot of strain on our IT operations, and whether getting users onboarded, offboarded, right? There is a lot of great capabilities and a lot of great features and great solutions on the tool to be able to help with some of those automation. And a great one is the Windows deployment using Autopilot. Autopilot is a great way to be able to ship your devices directly from your factory to your end user at home with a seamless zero-touch experience. And this is a great way to drop ship management-ready devices. There's a huge amount of significant cost and time savings on OS deployment. It bypasses a lot of traditional imaging-based deployments. It's also great to be able to ensure that your security from your endpoints are cohesively managed and you have a clean line of managing your Windows deployment. Okay. So when we talk about unifying management across devices and apps, Endpoint Manager allows you to deploy and manage secure your apps with the Endpoint Manager capability. So when we look at the unified management, we look at how are we able to deploy and manage our devices, applications across the whole spectrum. So with Endpoint Manager, you can do things such as deploy applications to your users, right? If you have a custom line of business application that you've created from the console itself. You can deploy that. You can deploy your Wi-Fi profile if you have users that want to be able to connect to your corporate network. You can do things such as if you have SSO capabilities that you want to provide with any applications, like for example, if you have like a custom applications, for example, that you want to put a custom app protection policy on it as well, you can deploy that from the app management, mobile application management capability. So it just gives you a way to be able to protect your devices, to ensuring that those devices that are connecting onto your Office 365 environment, to your cloud instances, those devices are protected, right? And another great capability with this tool is it comes with your E3 licenses. So most customers, when we talk about managing your device for device management, they look at, it's usually most of our customers don't really understand what this tool can do and the capability it's able to help our customers bring value in. And when we talk about manage any device, physical or virtual, we're looking at the deployment and managing your devices and virtual desktops, right? This is just, again, another great capability for what the Endpoint Manager tool can do. Okay. Here is the mobile application management capability. Here you can deploy manage applications on any devices. Here you can put your MAM policies on your mobile device management. We see a lot of our customers are doing device management for corporate-owned devices, or those COD. And then we see BYOD, or bring your own devices users, are doing more of the application management. Right? But if you have a custom line of application that you need to deploy, then you're going to have to do a device management capability. With the mobile application management, you're only containerizing your Office 365 applications. So that means that when a user tries to access corporate data, right, there's some sort of DLP controls on it to be able to protect those applications or protect your corporate information. So here, quickly, I'll just go ahead and show you guys a quick demo in a tenant. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
All right. So here, just going to go to endpoint.microsoft.com. And I'm going to sign in. So here's the dashboard of the Endpoint Manager console. Okay. So quickly, you see here, you have your dashboard where you can see some of your metrics, analytics, right? At the moment, I don't have any devices that are managed or that are in the tenant, but I'll just show you quickly some of the cloud reporting that you get, right? You see here the different types of platforms. Here we have, like, if you have Android devices, iOS, Mac OS, Windows, and Windows Phone. Okay. And here you can see we have our application side. If you have any platforms that you want to see, if you have a app protection policy that you have for your different types of OSs, you can see that. Here, I'll just quickly show you guys here a app protection policy. Here you can see here we have a Android application. We have an Android app protection policy here, and this application is to prevent data leak. And we see here how the policy was created. We have the policy targeting to our Office 365 apps, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, Word, and OneDrive. Now, also, if you have any custom application that support the Intune SDK, you can also add that custom application as well. And then here we can define a policy. For example, here, blocking backups. So you don't want your users blocking corporate data to the personal cloud storage. Here we have to be able to share organizational data. Here we only define it by policy managed applications. So mean that any applications that are managed by Intune, Endpoint Manager, then it will be considered, those applications will be considered a policy managed application. So those applications will be able to talk to each other. And then quickly here, we see here Some of the important ones, right? Where should users be able to save copies of corporate data? You want to put those in your OneDrive for Business, so you have a cohesive central repository location where users are saving their content, their corporate data. And then here we can restrict things such as like copy and pasting. So you want to prevent users from being able to take any corporate data outside of the containerized zone. That we can define this policy here. And then some of the access control policy here, such as PIN code. So let's say a user does not have, you don't want to enforce device management for users on the devices to be able to put restrictions on the device. You can define that on the application layer, where you can say, okay, if a user is using, for example, Outlook, and they must have a PIN code on that application, right? So Outlook supports the PIN access. So here we have a simple PIN code that we've deployed. So users can put in a simple PIN code, right, and the minimum four length as the password length. And right, if the OS supports some sort of fingerprinting or Face ID for iOS, we can also define that as well. So that just quickly shows you on the app protection policy. And then here, I would just quickly show you guys on the device configuration and compliance. Now, they all work hand in hand with compliance. So earlier when I talked about the conditional access policy for users that are having compliant devices to access Office 365, we saw that we defined a compliant, right? We defined a compliant control in that conditional access. Right? Now, those control are determined by the Intune MDM or Endpoint Manager MDM. What it does is here we can define our policies for compliance. So just quickly here, right? We can prevent such things such as like jailbroken. Users must have a PIN code on the device. And you can create those policies for iOS. You can define those policies for your Windows or Mac OS as well. Okay? And with those, once you have those policies enabled, then when the user goes and tries to access those resources, the Endpoint Manager service will check the user, make sure that the device meets your organizational compliance, then to be able to access those resources. And with that being said, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Chris.
Thanks, Christian. So we should be seeing the application security topic, our last and final conversation. So Christian talked about device management. Now we're talking about application security. Go ahead, Sasha.
So I fumbled this one because I launched it too soon. Okay. But if you guys don't mind, just our attendees to let us know, do you use device management for your endpoint right now? Just yes or no. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I hit the first time in.
Knowing that we're just about halfway through content, we should probably be moving on quickly.
Okay.
More topics to go. Is that okay?
Yes. Yep, keep going. Sounds good.
So how do we get visibility into your applications? And so we talked about devices and network access. Now we're talking about application discovery. So Microsoft has a tool called Cloud App Discovery. Christian mentioned MCAS earlier, which is Microsoft Cloud App Security, which requires an advanced subscription. Cloud App Discovery is actually now included in Azure AD Premium. So if you have an Office 365 or Microsoft 365 subscription, you have this capability. So the goal with this is to understand all of the cloud activity that's happened in your organization. Microsoft has a risk assessment for 16,000 applications. And with that information, that insight to understanding what's going on in your network, you can look at patterns and identify risky users. You can even, if you're concerned about certain applications, you can monitor or prevent users from accessing those applications. What we're finding, though, is there's a lot of shadow IT happening out there. We worked with an organization recently that did a conditional access policy, and then they discovered all this shadow IT because they didn't have a clear inventory or discovery of what's actually happening on the network. And so what this tool does is it takes all the traffic, you can ingest traffic from logs, and those logs can be across a broad array. In this case, we have a snapshot, a report from a Cisco firewall, but all the leading vendors are supported here. So you collect the logs, you upload the logs to the Cloud App Discovery, and it parses it out. And now I can see that we have 293 applications being used across our network by 500 users. And you can see upload and download traffic of those applications. And then it puts it into categories. And so primarily the bandwidth that we're using is cloud storage. And then I can go into more detail, which I like to do, on discovered apps. So here's a list of all the applications that we have. And Microsoft, as I mentioned, has 1,600 in their catalog, and so they rank them based upon their scores. And you can sort by this score, and you probably want to drill down into the ones that perhaps don't have great scores. And so in this case, we're drilling down to the yellows. We should be concerned about some of these and why. Maybe they don't align to our corporate policy or our compliance requirements. So let's take a look at Facebook, for example. If I drill down on Facebook, it's received a 7. Well, why is that? Well, we see that they don't allow audit trails. They're not compliant for ISO 27001 or FINRA or SOC. And if you're a federal organization or a financial services organization, this should be an alarm for you. Maybe you prevent people from using Facebook because of these regulatory compliance controls that are not in place. We all saw Mark Zuckerberg on testifying on Capitol Hill. He did not do a great job of understanding how his application aligns to these types of requirements. So Microsoft does provide that clarity if you need so. All right, that was fun. So our last topic is Windows Virtual Desktop. And I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to speak about this, but I'll move through the slides.
Thank you, Chris. So the last topic we wanted to cover is about Windows Virtual Desktop. I think we've seen increased interest in virtualization, specifically for use cases where you may have either custom application or legacy application that you need to access remotely. Windows Virtual Desktop is not a new technology. It's been around for many, many years. Many of you may have heard about Citrix or other similar technology which have provided remote desktop capability for a while. What's unique about the Microsoft new offering, which has been out for about a year now, it's the only product that delivers multi-session Windows 10 experience. So in the case of Windows Virtual Desktop, what's being virtualized is a Windows 10 operating system, not a Windows Server, which is different than what you've seen with Citrix or other capability or even VMware. It's optimized to use Microsoft Office. As a matter of fact, Microsoft Teams is supported as a virtual application inside Windows Virtual Desktop. It allows to migrate those legacy remote desktop connection, RDS, into Windows Virtual Desktop, simplifying licensing, reducing cost, and it deploys and scales virtually in minutes. It's all administered through the Azure portal. And not only it supports Windows 10 as a platform to connect to the VDI, but you can connect from Mac, iOS, Android, and even in HTML5 browser. So if you advance to the next slide. So we've, again, seen a lot of interest. If you do have legacy application, accounting system, or any other Windows-based application, you could leverage Windows Desktop as a means to produce remote access with a lot more security than what you may have today with an RDS connection. Just to recap, we've seen a lot of interest. If you're a smaller organization, Microsoft 365 Business Premium is the complete suite to give you end-to-end security. Security of your identity, security on the device, security at the application level with what Christian has shown in terms of a policy you can apply with cloud discovery, and policy and security at the document level, right? So end-to-end suite. If you're a large organization, the Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 plan provides similar capability, of course. So what's been interesting over the past few years, and for many of you on this webinar today, you probably don't realize that Microsoft is now also a security vendor, right? And the opportunity you have, and again, this gives you a cost comparison of comparing Microsoft 365 Business Premium. even if you went to the enterprise plan, there's tremendous potentially cost saving that are available. Many organizations I've seen that we work with is using third-party product that provide overlap or similar functionality that what you find in Microsoft 365 in the entire suite. Think about advanced email protection, conditional access, endpoint or MDM solution, device management, any software regarding endpoint scanning and endpoint security management is now included inside the Microsoft 365 Premium. So, we've done many ROI analysis for some of the organizations we work with. There certainly have been a tremendous amount of cost saving. And what we'll recommend, if you're in that situation, obviously you want to reach out to us. Gartner is now named Microsoft leader in a lot of those different areas, from endpoint protection management to cloud access security broker, that's the cloud discovery tool, from access management to archiving. So Microsoft has made its way up the security chain more than ever. And again, that's really something that we've been followed and been very excited about, to have the opportunity to consolidate all of those tools into one umbrella. To give you a sense, deploying the full Microsoft 365 suite can be done very, very quickly. I mean, we tend to phase things in, right? So if you're not on Microsoft 365 or even Office 365, we'll start moving your email and your files and your team management, establish, multi-factor authentication, maybe get you on Windows Virtual Desktop. This is just an example of a potential plan. Then quickly, right after, we'll want to enroll your devices, right? For some company, we do it all at once, right? But if you're a large organization, you have to phase things in. Start getting a handle of all your devices, phone, tablets, computers, etc. And then, move up and continue with a phase approach with adding security. We do a lot of assessments. Your organization may qualify from Microsoft 365 Accelerated Cloud workshops, which are funded by Microsoft, to assess sort of where you are in the process from security. So of course, reach out to us if that's something that you're interested with. And then when you think forward too as well, think about adding security to all the other layers, right? Your application, your productivity suite, think about the governance around security, and of course, the Power Platform and those other, additional capability as well. Microsoft has built a great tool that we've used. And again, if you're interested in understanding the overlap of all the other third party you're having from a security and compliance standpoint, and what's the overlap with Microsoft, there's a ROI tool that we use called the Value Calculator that provides this capability as well. All right, so what are the key takeaways, Chris and Christian?
Yeah, for me, it all starts with the identity, and we talked about Azure Active Directory, and then taking a look at the landscape. What is out there in your environment. I talked about Cloud App Discovery. That's a good way to get an assessment. Daniel mentioned that we also have the Microsoft collateral and workshops that we have delivered this past year for many clients. Reach out to us if you need us to run you through some of those scenarios. These are pretty low weight engagements to get a good understanding of where you currently are in your journey with Microsoft 365. And I know that we talked about licensing, and licensing it for me is natural because I've been living in this space, and so has Daniel for decades. But we really make sure that you're getting the most out of your Microsoft investments. And as Gartner has proven, that Microsoft really has made a lot of inroads and success by adding more value into the base level subscriptions. And then if you go to the Microsoft 365 subscriptions from an Office 365 subscription, one of the things that I always want to point out, and you had this in, as a topic, Daniel, was Windows Virtual Desktop. Well, you get that Windows license to run on your computer, with that subscription, but you also get another license to run in the cloud. And so that's paid for by your subscription. You can run another version of Windows that's tied to your identity and your profile in the cloud. And we're doing this for clients for under $30 per user per month. You can get an entire desktop available for you in the cloud. So whether you are on vacation, or traveling, or just working from home, it's great to be able to log into a centralized desktop to have everything secure as you need it. What I miss, Christian?
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Yep, really, thank you for sharing that. Right on top of what Daniel was talking about. But when we talk about security aspect, the security landscape in the Microsoft 365, Microsoft right now has a really great framework out there called the Zero Trust framework. And Chris, you're right. The first area that the Microsoft Zero Trust looks at is the identity, and a great takeaway from that is you just want to make sure that you are to prevent to be able to prevent some attacks within your organization. You want to deploy something as simple as just rolling out the MFA. It may require some adjustments, but that is a great way to be able to prevent some different types of threats and attacks. We did an assessment a few weeks ago where we were looking at we'll help the customer doing a security assessment, and they hadn't reviewed their identity, or they hadn't deployed any conditional access. We were able to discover a user that was terminated that was supposed to be in Florida, but they're actually signing in from China. So that was a risky user that we were able to help the customer. We detected that user, we flagged them, then we were able to put some controls in place or help our customer put some guardrails within the organization to be able to prevent things like that. So identity is a must area to be able to look at when looking at the security in the Microsoft Cloud.
That's great, thank you, Christian. And I see a few questions here. We got a few minutes here for a few Q&A. So Christian, what is Zero Trust? How will you define this interesting concept of not trusting anything? Can you expand a little bit about it? I think we hear a lot in the news with all this latest cyber attacks, that companies should implement Zero Trust approach. What is that?
So the Zero Trust has been around, and a lot of security companies actually use it, but Microsoft has taken theirs with a different approach, right? And when we talk about modern workplace specifically, it's a way of Microsoft is saying to embrace a more modern way of working, to be able to embrace more mobile workforces, and to actually enable users, empower users to access to corporate data, access, or to be able to work and from their, for example, iOS devices, to be able to work accessing, Teams meeting, accessing their using their Apple Watch, for example, to access emails, right? Anything right there. It's a way of just it's a way to embrace remote and modern way to work, right? But the underlying security behind it is you want to always verify explicitly, use the least privileged access, and assume a breach, right? And what I mean by verify explicitly, so you want to make sure that you always authenticate and authorize based on available data points, right? Including such as user identity, location, device health services or workload, any device classification if you're using AIP. And we talk about, what I mean by use the least privileged access, right? Just-in-time access, risk-based adaptive policies, right? And conditional access, data protection to ensure that there's a security on both data and productivity. And when I'm talking more about the assuming a breach, you want to minimize any blast radiuses for breaches to be able to prevent lateral movements by segmenting, accessing by network, users, devices, app awareness. So it's a way of ensuring that. It's a way of you want is a way of ensuring that all your access points that are accessing your corporate infrastructure have explicitly been verified, and that you've put in guardrails for each one of these types, for each one of these units or devices or users, to ensure that the security policy is at the core and it's being enforced in real time to be able to protect your organization against any threat. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does, definitely.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a concept within Microsoft 365, specifically the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, of privileged identity management, right? So if you're licensed for that, it allows you to control and limit administrative access only on demand. So for instance, if Christian, you wanted to give me access through PIM, you could say, Daniel, you know, you're going to request access to do this operation. Your access will be granted for an hour and then revoked automatically, right? So those are modern technologies to implement, you know, zero trust, right? I'm going to trust you for a period of time to do only one thing, right? And then I'll automatically revoke that privilege. That is how you can implement a privilege, you know, zero trust capability, and that's available inside Microsoft 365.
Right, just-in-time access. Well, speaking of just-in-time, we are on our last slide.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you all for joining. Chris, Christian, you provided amazing insight. I think many of you probably on this call didn't realize that, you know, the breadth of security capability that comes bundled in Microsoft 365, either business or enterprise plan. Of course, we're here to help. If you want to learn more about, you know, those topics, subscribe to our blog. We'll follow up with each and one of you with some information about workshops that are available that can help you test or discover those capability. And again, thanks again, Chris and Christian and Sasha, for setting this up, and we hope to see you on our next webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.